والذين تبوأوا الدار والإيمان من قبلهم يحبون من هاجر إليهم ولا يجدون في صدورهم حاجة مما أوتوا ويؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة ومن يوق شح نفسه فأولئك هم المفلحون.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alright, so we're going to start inshallah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Innal hamdalillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan 'abduhu wa rasuluh. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. So we're going to do Seerah today, inshallah. So for some of you who are new in joining us, I've been doing Seerah for a while with a group of people. I think it's been maybe 2 years now. So we've completed the Meccan period and we're now on the Medina period. So we just completed Hijrah and the Prophet ﷺ has just arrived in Medina. And what we started doing was we said that as soon as the Prophet ﷺ arrived in Medina, he had 4 projects to work on. The first project that he worked on was the masjid, and we talked about that in my last class, and I will gradually try and upload all the durus inshallah on the YouTube channel. So I'll keep sending the link out and you can try and follow it there. So we talked about the masjid and we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ completed building 2 masajid in less than a week, because when he arrives in Medina, he stays in the outskirts of Medina, and that's where he starts the construction of Masjid Quba. And once he has done that, of course it's not completed, but he starts off the construction and then he moves towards the city, the center of Medina. And then when he arrives in Medina, he starts the construction of Masjid al Nabawi. And for those who were there in my dars when I talked about this previously, we said that he allowed his camel to choose the location of the masjid. And there was obviously a lot of people who were very eager and keen for him to come towards their area or towards their dwelling. And he said to the people, he said that leave the camel because she is guided by Allah. And the camel sat in an open ground which used to be used to dry dates. So in those days, they had a lot of palm groves in Medina, and these dates would be, in the season of the dates, they would be laid out in this open ground to ripen and then dry up. And so this is the land that the camel sat down in, and it belonged to 2 orphans, and the Prophet ﷺ wanted to buy this land from them, but they said that we will not sell it to you, and we want to give you this land. And so this is where the construction of the masjid started. And like I mentioned before, that within the period of about a week, the Prophet ﷺ has started the construction of 2 masajid. And keep in mind that until now, he does not have a roof on his head. So he does not have his own home or a dwelling for himself. But his main concern was to start up building what you could say like a base or a center for all the Muslims to meet up, for them to gather, for them to learn from, there were a lot of things that would happen in the masjid, and we talked about that when we talked about the role of the masjid and how the armies would depart from the masjid. The liwa or the banners during their battles, they would be given out at the masjid. So the masjid played a very central and important role. And so it was very important to establish this kind of a center, at the start of establishing a new Muslim community. And we talked about the virtues of Masjid al Nabawi, and we talked about the adhan and the story of the adhan and how the adhan came about to be. And like I said, inshallah, I'll try and post this I'll try and send some links out, and then you can catch up with the previous durus. So today, inshallah, I want to talk about the ahl-al-suffah. Now, when the masjid was established in Medina, until now, the Qibla was Jerusalem. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ was in Mecca, he used to pray in the direction of Jerusalem, but as you can try and picture it, because the nature of the Kaaba is such that it's in the center, the Prophet ﷺ would pray towards Jerusalem, but with the Kaaba in between. So he would be facing the Kaaba, but in the direction of Jerusalem, if you can understand what I'm saying. And so until now, he was happy to pray in that direction because he's facing Jerusalem, but he's also facing the Kaaba. When he comes to Medina, Mecca is in the opposite direction. So again, you have to try and use a little bit of your geography. But the way Medina is located, Jerusalem is to the north and Mecca is to the south. So now, when he's praying in Medina towards Jerusalem, he is literally praying towards Jerusalem and giving his back to Mecca and to the Kaaba. And this was something that had been bothering him for a while. It was also on the mind of some of the Sahaba, and they had expressed it to him, but he had said that, this is the Qibla that Allah has chosen for us, and this is how we will pray. And then finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is so aware of what is in our heart and what we are longing for and what is in our minds, Allah revealed, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to him that we have seen you turn towards the Qibla of your choice, and we will change it for you. And so the Qibla was changed from Jerusalem to Mecca. So what happens now is that when the Qibla changes, again, if you can picture the masjid, an area which was the Qibla towards Jerusalem, now that becomes the back of the masjid, and the southern end of the masjid, which is towards Mecca, becomes the front of the masjid. So you can imagine that if you imagine the masjid being like a rectangular shape, what used to be the front has now become the back, and what used to be the back has now become the front because of the change of the Qibla from north to south. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he ordered for the old Qibla, which is the northern part of the masjid, for an area of that part to be covered with a shade made of palm fibers. And so they built in the center, and then they put these palm leaves on the top. So it was an open structure. It was not closed. It was an open structure, but it just had like a very, you could say, like a scanty roof. So it had a shade, but it was open on three sides. And this elevated structure that they made in the center, this is known as a suffah. And the people who occupied this area, now again, if you try and understand the dynamics of that society, obviously we don't have any hotels, we don't have any travel lodge or Airbnb or anything like that, right? So when people have come into the city, when people used to come into the city at the time, they would have to be hosted by someone, and they would have to be kept in someone's house. And that's why, the Prophet ﷺ, for example, he said that the right of the guest is for 3 days, and after that, he should look after himself. This is to say that because in those days people would, who are visiting the city, they will come and they will stay with someone, as somebody will have to host them. So for the first 3 days, they would be looked after, and then they would have to fend for themselves, or serve themselves more or less. But in this situation with the hijrah, we're not talking about 1 or 2 people coming in to visit the city. We're talking about a bit of an exodus, right, of a large number of people who've suddenly come into the city now. And mind you, they are not just travelers or visitors. These are people who have left everything that they had, all their possessions they have left behind, their land, their homes, their things. And they have literally come with whatever few things they could carry and bring across. So these are people who needed, you could say, long-term living arrangements. So the people who lived in this area, they were people who were extremely poor. They had literally no food, no spouse, or no wife, no wealth, and in some cases no clothes. I'm talking about abject poverty. So normally we look at people who are poor, but they have their basic needs fulfilled, but they're just poor. But here we're talking about people who are extremely poor, and they literally had nothing. And this is something I think nowadays for us, it is very difficult to understand that how do you, how do you imagine someone who has nothing? And these are literally people who had nothing. So, for example, even the clothes that they were so thin and so scanty and so little in size that they were not even enough to cover them properly. And that is one of the reasons why the women, they were told that when the Imam says Allahu Akbar and comes out of sujood, they should stay in sujood for a few seconds and allow the men to come out of sujood first, because these people had hardly anything to cover themselves with, and so that the women don't end up accidentally looking at their aura. So we're talking about extreme abject poverty. That was one category of people who made up the ahl-al-suffah. They were the people who had, nothing. The other category of people, which included this category as well, who had nothing, but were some people who chose to be ahl-al-suffah out of choice. So they wanted to devote their time to Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam. They wanted to devote their time to learning and improving themselves and furthering themselves in their deen. That was their main purpose, and that's all they wanted. They were just devoted to ibadah. They didn't have any interest in any of their dunya needs. So they were willing to leave everything and just focus on this. And so this was the other category. And of course, all the Ahl-ul-Suffah, they were devoted worshippers. Ibn Hajar, he gives the definition of as-Suffah, and he says that as-Suffah is a place at the back of Masjid al Nabawi. It is shaded and it was prepared for the foreigners, the ones who didn't have any family or any place to stay. And Abu Huraira said that Ahl-ul-Suffah are the guests of Islam. They are the ones who don't have any family or wealth to fall back on. So they lived in this place called as-Suffah. Can anyone give me an example of one or two people that you might know were from the Ahl-ul-Suffah?
Abu Huraira, sister.
Yes, very good, mashallah. Abu Huraira, he's probably the most prolific person that most people would know. Was one of the Ahl-ul-Suffah. And Abu Huraira, he was not necessarily extremely poor. He did, when he came to Medina, he did have some wealth, but he chose to devote himself to the study of Islam and to memorizing a hadith and spending all his time serving and spending time and learning from the Prophet ﷺ. So he chose to leave everything else and just devote his time to this. And there were other people like him who did this by choice. And Abu Huraira, he says about himself as well, he said that people wonder and people ask that how is it that Abu Huraira narrates more hadith than the Muhajirin and the Ansar? Does anyone know why it is so strange for us that Abu Huraira has narrated the maximum, the greatest, the highest number of ahadith? Does anybody know how many years Abu Huraira spent with the Prophet ﷺ?
3 years only. He was blessed with an immensely powerful memory.
Yes, very good, mashallah. So Abu Huraira only spent 3 years with the Prophet ﷺ. He became Muslim much later on. He becomes Muslim in the 7th year of the Hijrah. And so he spends only 3 years with the Prophet ﷺ. And so that's why it is so amazing that someone spends such little time with the Prophet ﷺ, and yet he narrates over 5,000 hadith. So he gives the explanation and the answer himself. He said that the brothers from the Muhajirin were busy with business, and I used to follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with an empty stomach. I was poor and had nothing, but I would follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam all the time. He said, I would attend when the Muhajirin were absent, and I would remember when they would forget. The Ansar were busy with their farms. I was a poor man, and I would remember what they wouldn't. So what he's explaining here is that, you see, in Medina, there were the Ansar and the Muhajirin. The Ansar, they were their own farms and agriculture. So they were busy with their agriculture because they were the inhabitants of Medina. So they owned land and farms and agriculture. The Muhajirin, they came from Mecca and they were trying to set up business in order to, earn a living. And so That's why Abu Huraira is saying that the Ansar were busy with their farms and the Muhajirin were busy with their business. And he said, I left both of those things. I left everything and I would just accompany the Prophet ﷺ on an empty stomach. So obviously they had to make a sacrifice somewhere. So if they were going to leave their means of livelihood, that was the sacrifice they had to make to be able to get as much knowledge as they can from the Prophet ﷺ. And so that's what he's saying he would do. And it is said that Abu Huraira devoted all his time to studying and reviewing the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And he says that he split the night into three parts: one part for sleeping, one for praying, and the third part for reviewing the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that he would hear throughout the day. So he's trying to memorize the hadith and he has to revise them. So he would split his night into three parts. In one part of the night he would sleep. In the second part of the night he would pray the tahajjud, and in the third part of the night he would revise the hadith that he had heard and memorized from the Prophet ﷺ. Now, what was the source of livelihood for the Ahl-ul-Suffah? How did they get their food or earn their living? So basically you could say they were the responsibility of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, of course, he loved them very much and he cared for them very much, and he felt like this was his responsibility to look after their and to look after their upkeep, basically. And so the Prophet ﷺ, when he would receive any sadaqah, and the Prophet ﷺ would time to time, he would keep receiving sadaqat, and as the Prophet ﷺ, he would not, he's not allowed to take anything from the sadaqah, him or his family. So when he would receive sadaqat, he would pass all the sadaqah onto the Ahl-ul-Suffah. When he would receive a gift, this is something that he can take. He would take a little and he would give the rest to the Ahl-ul-Suffah. It is also said sometimes, he would give preference to them over himself. So if there was only very little bit, he would give it to them and he would stay hungry. And the Prophet ﷺ also, that was the first way, where the Prophet ﷺ is looking after them himself as much as he can. The second thing he would do is he would encourage the people who were well off to invite the people of as-Suffah for meals. So the Prophet ﷺ, he ordered the Sahaba to invite Ahl-ul-Suffah to their house. So the people who had homes and who had food, they would come to the masjid and they would take a few of the Ahl-ul-Suffah. So there was a time when a number of people came and they took a few people at a time, until they said that there was 5 of us left amongst the Ahl-ul-Suffah, and there was no more people coming to take any more people to their home. And so they said that the Prophet ﷺ, he told them, he took them to his house and he fed them. So if you think about it, although these 5 people would have felt very sad that, we still haven't been selected to be taken to anyone's home for a meal, mashallah, they got the barakah of going and eating with the Prophet ﷺ. So they were the last 5 who were left. And the Prophet ﷺ, he would also say to the Ansar and to the people who had homes and food, he would say that whoever has food enough for 2 people should take a third, and whoever has enough food for 4 people should take a 5th or 6th person with him. And mind you, some of these Sahaba who are being, requested to do this, they're not very rich themselves, they are not millionaires, they're not very well off. But the Prophet ﷺ is teaching them that sacrifice and sharing and caring for your brothers is an integral part of our religion. Okay, assalamu alaikum, ladies. Is everybody back? And you can all hear me, inshallah? Yes, okay, alhamdulillah. All right. So just continue, inshallah. Okay, so as I was saying, the Prophet ﷺ, when he taught these people from the beginning that, whether you have a little or a lot, sacrifice, generosity, caring for your neighbors, for your brothers and sisters. This is all an integral of our deen. And from the beginning, they are taught that sacrifice and generosity is very important in Islam. And of course, in the Quran, there are so many ayat talking about giving to the orphan, to the poor, to the needy, being generous, looking after your guests, etc. Fatima radiallahu anha, she came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she was working very, very hard at home. And she was really struggling. Her hands had become injured and coarse from the excessive work that she had to do. And so she was really struggling. And so Ali radiallahu anhu, her husband, he said to Fatima radiallahu anha, he said that your father has received some slaves. So why don't you go and ask him for a servant? So she went to her father, and she went to the Prophet ﷺ, and she said to him, she said that, I have heard that you have received some slaves. Can you give me a servant or a slave? And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said to, and mind you, the Prophet ﷺ, he doted on Fatima radiallahu anha. She was the apple of his eye. He loved her more than anything. He really, really loved her. And if he was going to do anything for anyone, he would have done it for her. And so he knew her situation. He knew that she is struggling. And so when she asked him for a servant, he said to her, he said, by Allah, I am not going to give you and leave the people of As-Suffah with hungry stomachs, because they don't have any money. And he said, I don't have any money to spend on them, so I'm going to sell these slaves and use that money to give to Ahl-ul-Suffah. So this is how much concern and how much responsibility he felt towards the Ahl-ul-Suffah, that he even turned away his daughter. He could have said that, oh, I have all these slaves, I can give her one slave. It's not going to make such a big difference. But for him, each of these slaves and the money that he was going to receive from selling these slaves meant that he was going to be able to feed that many stomachs. Now we keep talking about the Ahl-ul-Suffah. How many were they? Does anybody know? That's a good guess, but it's not right. Yes, so somebody said 70. I think said 70. So yeah, there was about 70 of them. And these 70 were the ones who lived 24 hours in that area of the masjid. But it is said that that area of the masjid, it could accommodate up to 300 people. But the people who lived there constantly were about 70. And of course, these numbers were varying because, sometimes as their situation would improve, or they got married or something like that would happen, they would move and then a new person would come, etc. But approximately there was about 70 of them who lived constantly in the masjid. They were obviously, very active in studying. They were very close to the center of learning, which is the Masjid al Nabawi. And you could say it was like the first university of Islam. And so you can imagine, like, they're living in the university. So one of the main things that they're doing is learning. And that is why a lot of the Ahl-ul-Suffah have narrated large numbers of ahadith. Like I said to you, that their main purpose was to devote their life and their time to learning and to being close to the Prophet ﷺ and being close to Allah. That was their main purpose. They didn't have interest in dunya and earning. They looked a bit disheveled because they were living in the open. Like I said, that there was only a roof on their head, but otherwise it was an open area. So they were exposed to the cold. They obviously did not have any 5-star facilities. So they were living, you could say, in the outdoor open space, of course with the roof on their head. And sorry, I was mentioning to you about their livelihood, and I forgot to mention one last thing. So one was the Prophet ﷺ was looking after them. The second thing was the Prophet ﷺ encouraged the Ansar and whoever had dwellings and food uh, to to try and share it with them by inviting them over. The third thing that they were trying to do was they would gather date stones and crush them and sell them as animal feed, and earn whatever little they could to eat from it. And the fourth way that they would be able to eat was by the Ansar coming and hanging bunches of dates in the masjid. So these dates would be hanging, and they could go and they could just hit the dates with their stick, and ripe dates would fall down, and they would eat them. They were very conscientious of making sure that the dates are evenly distributed, that everybody gets a fair share of food that was given to them. Now, these people, it should not be thought that they were just sitting and eating free food or something like that. Like I've mentioned, they were devoted to learning, and somebody needed to be there to do that. And that is how a lot of the you could say, like the narrations of the Prophet ﷺ and his teachings have reached us by their hard work in memorizing these ahadith and devoting the time just to learn. Because obviously devoting this time to learn meant that they lived more difficult lives. They spent more days hungry. They were obviously not really looking after their dunya needs. So they are making a sacrifice just to try and get this knowledge so that they can pass it on. So this was one of the main things that they were doing. The second thing that they were they were in the front lines for was fighting. During battle time, they were amongst the front rows, and a lot of them became shuhada. So they were scholars and mujahideen. There is somebody who is known as Al-Ghasil bil Malaika. Does anybody know his name? He was also one of the Ahl-ul-Suffah. Anyone? He was killed during the Battle of Uhud. He was shaheed in the Battle of Uhud.
Hamdallah?
Yes, very good, mashallah. It was Hamdallah. So Hamdallah was also one of the Ahl-ul-Suffah. Okay. And they said that, like for example, Ubadah ibn Samit said that that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would become busy, so he would turn over the new Muslims to us. So he said, if a new muhajir or a new Muslim would come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and if he was busy, then he would send them over to one of us to teach him Quran. And he said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent to me a man. He stayed with me at home, and I would feed him as a member of my own family, and then I would teach him Quran. So when they would do dawah to a new Muslim, that would include them taking care of this new Muslim or the new muhajir who has come. And these Ansar, they were completely aware that that these muhajirin, they had left everything behind and come completely empty-handed. So they took it upon themselves. They felt it was their responsibility to try and look after them as much as possible and do whatever was in their capacity to do for them. So Hamdallah was one of the well-known Sahaba amongst the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and what he is really well known for is that he was one of the Ahl-ul-Suffah, and he got married. And the day he got married, you could say he spent the night with his wife, and in the morning the battle was announced. So he had spent the night with his wife, and he did not have time to take a ghusl because he immediately went for battle. So when he went into the Battle of Uhud, he was killed. And of course, he was in a state of janaba. And so the Sahaba said that we saw something very strange. They said we saw Hamdallah's body being washed, and it was dripping with water. And as you know that a shaheed is not washed, he is not given ghusl, He is not shrouded in kafan. He is buried the way he is. And so they were really confused because they saw because they saw water dripping from his hair, and so then it was explained to them by the Prophet ﷺ that the angels had washed him because he was in a state of janaba, and so he is known as al-Ghasil bil Malaika. So that was who Hamdala was, and he was one of the Ahl-ul-Suffah. Okay, and the Prophet ﷺ, he wanted this the new Muslim society to be very organized, which is why he was so keen on setting up the masjid, and that was the first thing that he did. He set up the masjid. What he also did was, for example, with the Ahl-ul-Suffah, he appointed representatives over these groups of people. And so for the Ahl-ul-Suffah, Abu Huraira was an arif. An arif is someone who represents his people, and he expresses or conveys the people's needs to the leader. And so rather than there being confusion and chaos where you have 70 people plus or minus, and one person has this problem, one person has that, and there's like chaos, and they're all running up to the Prophet ﷺ, one by one, and saying, oh, I want this and I have this problem. So rather than it being chaotic, he elected or appointed a representative, and that was Abu Huraira. And so Abu Huraira would come and express to the Prophet ﷺ if there was any need or any issue that the Sahaba are facing from the Ahl-ul-Suffah. And if the Prophet ﷺ had any message that he wanted to convey to the Ahl-ul-Suffah, he would also similarly convey it to Abu Huraira, and Abu Huraira would go and convey it to the Sahaba. So these things show us that from the beginning, Islam is a very organized religion, and it's not haphazard, and it's well planned out and thought out, and so that's why by being organized, things can flow easily and systematically. With that, I think I have covered more or less what I wanted to tell you about the Ahl-ul-Suffah. I just want to finish talking about the Ahl-ul-Suffah by telling you the story of one of the people of Ahl-ul-Suffah, even though I told you the story of Hamdala, which is also one of the stories of the Ahl-ul-Suffah. But there's this story which is really, really dear to me, and I really love the story. So I wanted to tell you about the story. So I will inshallah end with that story, and inshallah next time we will talk about the second project that the Prophet ﷺ takes on when he reaches Medina, and that is what they call al-mu'akha, which is establishing brotherhood. So we'll talk about that next time inshallah. But just to end with the story inshallah. So this is the story of Rabi'a ibn Ka'b al-Aslami, and he was one of the Ahl-ul-Suffah, and he was extremely poor. Like I said, he had nothing. The Ahl-ul-Suffah, like I said to you, because they used to depend on somebody inviting them or somebody bringing food or sending them something, there would be days and days where they would go without anything at all. They would actually just stay hungry, and this would keep happening. And for example, Abu Huraira, he says there are times when he would pass out, he would collapse in the masjid while he's praying. There are times when he would tie rocks and stones to his stomach so that he doesn't feel the hunger. There are times he would sleep on his stomach so that he doesn't feel the pangs of hunger. So Rabi'a ibn Ka'b al-Aslami, he was also extremely poor, and he chose to serve the Prophet ﷺ in the masjid. So what he would do, you could say he was like his servant. So he would prepare the water for wudu for the Prophet ﷺ. He would he would bring his slippers to him. He would do things like this to serve the Prophet ﷺ. And so one day, Rabi'a, he prepared the Prophet ﷺ's wudu water, and he gave it to him. And the Prophet ﷺ, he looked at him as if he was pleased with Rabi'a. And he looked at Rabi'a and he said to him, Ya Rabi'a, salni, which means, oh Rabi'a, ask, or ask me. So he's basically saying, that if you need anything, ask me for it. So he's pleased with him. He's happy with his service and him serving him. So he's, out of his happiness, he's saying to him that, is there anything I can do for you? Do you need anything? Now, when you read the actual words of in the story, right, you can't help but think that the Prophet ﷺ is obviously he's aware of his abject condition where he has nothing, and he's probably asking, to see if he can fulfill one of his immediate needs. So, I want you to imagine yourself in the position of Rabia, and imagine that you have no home, you have no clothes, you have no food, you have no wife, you have no job. And I think out of all of these things, I think one of the biggest things that is probably the thing that would bother most people is food, is being on an empty stomach. This is something that we all struggle with. When it's been like a very, very long time and we haven't eaten, we just have food going round and round in our head. We find it so difficult to focus on anything because we're just thinking, I'm hungry, what's the next thing I'm going to eat? When am I going to eat next? So put yourself in that situation and think about this. And also remember that who's asking this question? The Prophet ﷺ at this time, he is the leader of Medina. You could say he is the king of his people. So whatever the Prophet ﷺ says is going to get done. So if Rabi'a says, it would be nice if you could arrange some food for me, it's done. The Prophet ﷺ is going to tell someone that please arrange some food for me, it'll be done. Or he says, can you please arrange a house for me? I don't want to live here anymore. I'd like a house. It'll be done. If he says, I want a wife, can you please, help me get married? The Prophet ﷺ will order that, can somebody please arrange marriage for Rabi'a, and it will be done. So what does Rabi'a say? Rabi'a says, Ya Rasulullah, as'aluka murafaqatak fil jannah. That, O Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, I want to be with you, or I ask you for your companionship in Jannah. I want to be with you in Jannah. And these things, they just show us, that these people, they were so focused. They were so intelligent. They knew exactly where the success is. They knew exactly what is the thing that is the best thing for them. They were not distracted like us. They were not, scattered all over the place like us. They were focused. They knew exactly what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. And so the Prophet ﷺ, like I said to you, it seems like the Prophet ﷺ had in his mind to fulfill a dunya request, an immediate request of Rabi'a's. So the Prophet ﷺ says, Awa ghayra dhalik, that, is there anything else that you want? That, okay, is there anything else? Because he's still thinking that, his immediate needs. I mean, even now, Rabi'a has the chance to say, okay, since I've put in my main request, now I can say that, okay, it would be nice if I could have some food as well, or if I could have a wife, or if I could have a job or a house. He could have still, asked for something else. What does Rabi'a says? قال يا رسول الله هو ذاك. He said, that's all I want. When you read these stories and when you hear these stories, it is so difficult to understand what kind of human beings were these, and why is our focus so distracted? Why do we not think like this? Why are we so if somebody in position was to ask us what we want, why would our answer be so different to this? Does anybody know any answers? Why are they so focused and we are not?
They were more attached to the akhirah.
Yes, so the answer I'm looking for is that they were not attached to the dunya. They were detached from the dunya. And that is our main problem, that we are attached to the dunya. And so it's so difficult for us to look beyond this and to try and think of the treasures beyond the treasures that are, you know, in front of us. And we're just distracted and pulled away from the akhirah because of the dunya. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said to Rabi'a, because this is, you know, he's asking for a big thing. It would have been easier if he had asked for some food or a wife or a home or a job. He's asking for something much bigger, and he's asking for something which is not easy. And so even for the Prophet ﷺ, he said to him, قال فأعني على نفسك بكثرة السجود. He said, if you want to be with me, then assist me with a lot of sujood. So he is encouraging and advising Rabi'a that if that is what he really wants, then he has to increase in his salah. Because how do you increase in sujood? You increase by praying and doing more salawat. And you know, obviously salah is your main link. Like I've said, you know, several times, that the quality of your salah is a very good reflection of your relationship with Allah, because that is when you are speaking to Allah. So the way you do your salah, it should give you a good idea of where you stand with Allah. And you know, if you want a high place in Jannah, and if you want to be amongst the neighbors of the Prophet ﷺ, you want to be near him, you want to be with him in Jannah, you need Allah on your side, and you have to work hard for it, because you need Allah's rahmah and his mercy and his favor to put you in that place. And that is not going to happen to someone who is distant and who is very far away from Allah. So you have to be very close to Allah, and the way to be very close to Allah is to be extremely keen on your salah, and to do a lot of salah, and to enjoy a lot of salah. A lot of us, we are just ticking the box, and a lot of us, we are just trying to do the minimum that we need to do to just get by. You know, there's very few people who actually try and complete all their sunan, or who try and even pray even their sunan with khushu. Very few people try and do that. It's really something that we're just trying to finish really quickly. But as you can see, that if we want to be with the Prophet ﷺ in Jannah, then this is something that has to become our focus today, so that tomorrow we can reap the harvest, inshallah. And the thing to think about is, you know, compare Rabi'a's dreams and his ambitions to most of our dreams and our ambitions. You know, they are poles apart, and like we said, it's because of his detachment from the dunya and our attachment to the dunya. That's why the Sahaba were what they were, because they didn't care about the dunya, they didn't care for the dunya. The dunya didn't really mean anything to them. It was just a necessity, you know, so they just took from it what they needed, nothing extra. Whereas us, you know, we don't mind the extra, and that is what brings us down. And naturally, you know, if the more comfort you have here, and the more you are distracted from your akhirah, so obviously you are sending less into your akhirah, you're putting less effort into your akhirah, so you're reluctant to leave your comforts and go into a realm which is not prepared, which is not furnished, which has not been, you know, beautified or decorated by you, because you've neglected it. So you don't want to go from, you know, your comfort and where you have everything, to a place where, you know, you had neglected it, so there is nothing there. And also, you know, if we compare our youth to the youth at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. You know, they just they aspire. Their main aspirations are dunya aspirations. It's very rare to find a young person whose focus is akhirah and Jannah, and who's just thinking about, you know, planting his trees and making his palaces in Jannah. And it's very rare to find a young person who finds, you know, who finds real happiness, for example, in reciting Quran or in memorizing a few verses of Quran. That's where his real happiness is. Most people's real happiness is in gaining this or in gaining that, or in, you know, worldly gains. You know, getting a good car, or, you know, I've heard so many of the youth saying, I just want to get into Jannah. You know, I don't mind if um, I don't mind if I don't get Firdaus. I just want to enter Jannah, as long as I just get into Jannah. Um, if you compare that with their dunya goals, they're not happy to just drive any car, or to just have any wife, or to just have any house. You know, they want the best car, they want the most beautiful wife, they want the best house, they want their children to have the best achievements. So in the dunya, you know, we have these high aims and goals, and we want the best. But when it comes to akhirah, we are happy to just settle with just, you know, oh, just as long as I just get in. I mean, I understand that is Jannah, so even the least will be the most amazing thing. But we should aspire for higher than that. The Prophet ﷺ, he advised us to do that. He said, when you ask for al-Firdaus. You know, he didn't say to us that just ask just to enter Jannah. So, and to get to Firdaus, and to get to a place where the Prophet ﷺ is, and to be near him, and to be able to see Allah, we need to put these heavy things in our mizan. We need to do those extra things. We need to be special in the sight of Allah, to be in a special place in the akhirah. And we need to go through those struggles here, so that we can enjoy the comfort and the ease there. And if we are going to rest and relax here, then we will struggle and suffer there, because you can't have two eases and you won't have two difficulties. So with that, we come to the end of this dars, inshallah. If there's any questions, I'll take it. Otherwise, we will end the class, inshallah. Barakallah feekum. Any questions? Jazakumullahu khairan to all of you for attending. And you know, I always say this, that from all the people around, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, selected you to attend this blessed gathering, and to you know, get the benefits of attending this. And inshallah, I hope we earn Allah's pleasure and his maghfirah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reunites us in his highest jinan, amongst the neighbors of the Prophet ﷺ, and amongst those who will see him, and that he will be pleased with us, and we are pleased with him. So Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, that you know, Allah guided us to be able to spend our time doing this. So although this curfew and the current situation has caused us to be within our homes, but you know, for a believer, everything is an opportunity. So even this, mashallah, you know, there is so much good that has come out of this. So normally I was doing this dars for a handful of people in someone's home, and mashallah la quwwata illa billah, you know, we were able to open this platform for so many more people. So there's always khair and barakah and everything. Somebody was asking, how do we increase in sujood? So you increase in sujood by increasing salah. So try and do as much salah as you can. There are so many salawat that the Prophet ﷺ taught us to do. So apart from the 5 salawat, there is duha, there is tahajjud, there is the sunan that the Prophet ﷺ would regularly do with his faraid. Then there is other nawafil that you can do at any time. You know, there is no like a set number or quantity of those. So by increasing in the salah, and even for example, duha, which you're supposed to do after sunrise and before zawal, before dhuhr time. You can split that as well, so that you are in a constant state of remembering Allah. So you can do 4 rakahs, for example, straight after sunrise, and then towards the middle of the day, or towards just before dhuhr time, like 20 minutes before dhuhr, you can do another 4 rakahs. I just feel personally, when you stand to do these extra rak'at, I feel embarrassed and ashamed to just do 2 and leave it at that, because I feel that, who are we worshipping? Who are we standing in front of? I'm standing in front of Allah. How can I just do 2 rakahs and leave it? So try to do as much as you can, and try and remember who you are standing in front of. Try and be in the right frame of mind. Similarly, when you're giving sadaqah, if you're looking through your coins to give sadaqah, again, it's almost embarrassing, because I think, who am I giving this money to? I'm giving this money to a poor person, but I'm giving it for the sake of Allah. So I feel ashamed or embarrassed to just, if you can understand what I'm trying to say, that if you think that you are standing in front of Allah, you're giving for the sake of Allah, you will give generously, you will give fully and properly. And similarly, you will pray properly if you remember who you are standing in front of and what you are doing, what action you are doing. And it's the example that I've given you all previously, of how to have khushu in salah. There are some more questions. Yes, you can do a few rakahs after every wudu. You can do a couple of rakahs. And there are some extra sunnahs which you can do, like somebody has mentioned. There's sunnah before asr, which the Prophet ﷺ would occasionally do. So yes, there are a lot of extra salawat that we can do. Inshallah, Allah accept them from us, and make us amongst those who are as-salihin and sadiqeen, and those who are from His special people, inshallah. Okay, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. But I was just mentioning about the khushu. I'm just going to end with that, inshallah. But I was just saying that when you stand in salah, the reason we don't have khushu is because we really don't understand what we're doing, and we've just made it like such a mundane thing to do. And so I gave this example last time about imagine if you're driving on the road, and suddenly you're stopped by the police, and then the police comes and he says, get out of the car. So when you're standing in front of this police officer, how are you going to feel? You're going to be shaking. You're going to be very scared. And you did not have to attend a class or read a book about how to behave in front of a police officer, right? You're naturally going to be very scared, because you know what the police officer is capable of doing. You know his authority. You know his powers. Unfortunately, we don't know Allah, and we don't know who we're standing in front of, and that's why our salah is so weak. And that's why we have to learn and understand how we have to behave when we stand in front of Allah. And what we need to do is we need to learn who Allah is. Inshallah, I hope one day we can study that. We can study Allah's names and attributes. Okay, inshallah. So with that, we'll end this session. Wa subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullahu khairan again, everybody, for attending. Inshallah, we'll see you next week with the Nawawi's 40 hadith. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.